It all started as a quiet weekend at our lake cabin, a place my wife and I had worked hard to turn into our peaceful getaway. The air was crisp, the water calm, and for once, everything seemed perfect. But as we would quickly learn, living near an overbearing neighbor who thinks she runs the world, even outside her hoe, can turn peace into chaos in a matter of minutes. You see, there's always that one person who feels entitled to control what isn't theirs, and in our case, that person was Karen, the self-proclaimed enforcer of rules that don't even exist on our property. It began with something simple. My wife decided to change the gate lock on our cabin. We wanted a little extra security and privacy, nothing unusual, nothing dramatic. But to Karen, this harmless change was seen as a personal offense, as if our property somehow belonged to her. Within minutes, she stormed over, demanding answers, shouting about community rules, and acting like she had the authority to make decisions on our land. We tried to stay calm, but the more we explained, the angrier she became. Then came the part that still shocks me to this day. Karen actually called 911 on my wife. She told the police that my wife was breaking rules and blocking access, even though the cabin and the gate were completely ours. Imagine standing on your own property, minding your own business, and suddenly being treated like a criminal because of a neighbor who simply couldn't mind her own business. That phone call set off a chain of events that none of us expected. What happened when the authorities showed up changed everything, and it left Karen facing consequences she never saw coming. The strange part about all of this was that Karen had no connection to our lake cabin whatsoever. She didn't own the land, she wasn't part of our property lines, and our cabin wasn't even inside her hoe. Yet, for reasons we still can't fully understand, she behaved as though she had the authority to dictate what we could and couldn't do. It was almost like she believed our lakefront cabin fell under her control simply because she lived nearby. Over the years, we had brushed off her comments about keeping things uniform or following the rules, but this time felt different. This time, she was determined to push things further. For us, the gate was more than just a lock. It symbolized our right to keep our home secure, a small step to protect the peace we came here to enjoy. But to Karen, it became her excuse to stir up conflict. As my wife screwed the new lock into place, Karen stood at a distance with her phone in hand, glaring, almost as if she was waiting for a reason to escalate the situation. When she dialed 911, her voice carried across the quiet lake, and it was clear she wasn't just reporting a concern, she was making a scene. We tried to reason with her, explaining that the cabin and the gate were ours, that she had no claim to it, but every word seemed to fuel her even more. She accused us of blocking community access, though no one but us had ever used the gate. My wife's calmness only seemed to irritate her further, as though not reacting to her drama made her more desperate to prove her point. The call had been made, and the authorities were on their way. The quiet lake afternoon had shifted into something tense and uncertain, and we could only wonder what would unfold when the officers arrived. Minutes felt like hours as we stood by the gate, waiting for the sound of sirens or tires crunching down the gravel road. The lake was usually a place of laughter and calm, but now it felt like the water itself had gone still, almost holding its breath. My wife kept busy near the porch, trying to act normal, but I could tell she was worried. I tried to reassure her, yet the truth was, I had no idea how this was going to play out. Karen paced at the edge of our property like she owned it, phone still in her hand, muttering things loud enough for us to hear. She spoke about rules, safety, and shared access, twisting words that made no sense in the context of our land. To anyone listening from the outside, it might have sounded reasonable. That's what made it so frustrating. She knew how to paint herself as the victim while making us look like the problem. The bigger issue was that this wasn't just about a lock. It was about control. Karen had tried before to influence little things, where we parked our boat, how long the dock lights stayed on at night, even the type of fence we put up by the water. We always brushed it off, thinking it wasn't worth the fight. But now it was clear this wasn't going away. If she could call the police over something as small as a gate lock, what would she do next? As we waited, I noticed a few other neighbors stepping outside, curious about the commotion. Some gave us sympathetic looks, others kept their distance, not wanting to get involved. The stage was set, and with the authorities on their way, the real confrontation hadn't even begun. The sound of tires finally broke the silence, crunching slowly along the gravel road toward our cabin. My wife froze where she stood, and I felt my stomach sink. This was it. Karen straightened her posture instantly, as if she had been preparing for this moment, and waved her arms dramatically to make sure she was the first one the officers saw. Her voice carried across the property, full of urgency, as she pointed at our new gate lock like it was evidence of some crime. Two officers stepped out of the vehicle, calm but observant, scanning the scene. Karen rushed to them, words spilling out so fast it was hard to even follow. She claimed we were blocking community access, accused my wife of ignoring regulations, and even suggested we were hiding something behind that gate. The sheer confidence in her tone made it sound believable, and I could tell she had rehearsed this narrative in her head. Meanwhile, my wife stood quietly by the porch, her calm presence a stark contrast to Karen's theatrics. I walked forward slowly, careful not to escalate things, and prepared to explain. But before I could even say much, one of the officers raised his hand, signaling me to wait. They wanted to hear Karen's side first. The neighbors who had gathered kept their eyes fixed on us, some whispering under their breath. The weight of their attention made the moment even more intense. I could feel the tension building, like the outcome of this encounter might set the tone for everything moving forward at the lake. When the officers finally turned toward us, their expressions gave nothing away. We were seconds away from either being understood or being completely misunderstood. Everything hung in the balance. Just as the officers turned to us, Karen suddenly shifted her story. She wasn't just claiming the lock-blocked access anymore. She went further, insisting that the land our cabin sat on was community property and that we had no right to control it. The words hit like a shockwave. I could see some of the neighbors exchange looks, as if they weren't sure what to believe. Karen had taken her complaints to a whole new level, and in that moment, I realized she was no longer just angry about the gate. She was trying to question our ownership altogether. The officers asked for documents to prove what she was claiming, but of course, Karen didn't have any. Instead, she doubled down, saying she had files at home that would prove everything. Her confidence was so strong it almost created doubt in the air. And that's when the second twist unfolded. One of the neighbors stepped forward. To our surprise, he supported Karen, saying he too thought the gate wasn't fair and that the lake should stay open for everyone. Suddenly, this wasn't just Karen against us anymore. A small but vocal group was forming, ready to stand behind her story. My wife and I exchanged glances, both of us realizing how quickly things were spinning out of control. It was no longer about a lock, or even about Karen's obsession with control. Now it was becoming a larger conflict, one that could affect how everyone in the community viewed us and our cabin. The officers, caught in the middle, took notes carefully, their serious faces giving away nothing. The pressure was mounting, and I knew the next words out of our mouths, or theirs, could decide everything. The situation had escalated far beyond what we expected, and the real test was only beginning. The officers finally turned their full attention to us, asking calmly if we had any proof of ownership. My wife, steady as ever, disappeared inside the cabin and returned with a folder we always kept handy, our deed, property maps, and even county records that clearly showed the land and gate were ours alone. I watched as the officers looked over the papers carefully, flipping through each page while Karen stood nearby, her arms crossed and her face tightening with every passing second. When they finished, one officer turned back to Karen and asked her directly if she had any documentation to support her claims. For the first time that afternoon, her confidence wavered. She stammered about files at home, but the officers didn't budge. They explained firmly that without proof, she had no right to interfere with our property or to call 911 for something that wasn't an emergency. The neighbors who had gathered fell quiet, some looking embarrassed for having sided with her. But just when it seemed the conflict was over, the unexpected twist came. One of the officers revealed that this wasn't the first complaint they had received about Karen. Apparently, she had a history of filing calls against other neighbors, stretching the truth each time to make herself sound like the victim. That revelation shifted the entire mood instantly. The neighbors who had stood with her moments ago now pulled back, realizing they might have been manipulated all along. Karen tried to defend herself, but the damage was done. The officers issued her a stern warning, making it clear that any further false reports could carry serious consequences. As she stormed off, the lake grew quiet again, but the truth hung in the air. This battle was finished, yet the story of HOA Karen was far from over. As the officers drove away and the neighbors drifted back to their homes, a calm finally settled over the lake. My wife and I stood by the gate for a long moment, letting the weight of the day sink in. The new lock, the very thing that had sparked all this chaos, now felt like more than just a bit of security. It felt like a symbol of standing our ground. For the first time, we realized how important it was not to let someone else's noise dictate our peace. Some neighbors came by quietly later that evening, offering words of support. A few admitted they had believed Karen in the past because she always spoke with such authority, but now they could see her pattern clearly. It was reassuring to know that not everyone had been fooled, and slowly, it felt like the community's trust was shifting back in our direction. For us, the experience was a reminder of how quickly a small issue can spiral when someone thrives on control. What started as a simple gate lock became a battle over property rights, community perception, and even our sense of belonging at the lake. The unexpected twist, that Karen had a history with these kinds of false reports, wasn't just a shock to us, but also a wake-up call for everyone who lived nearby. In the end, we learned that protecting your home isn't only about locks and deeds, it's about standing up calmly when others try to push past boundaries. The cabin remains our safe place, and though Karen may not change,